All right. Well, it's weird to be on the other side of this as opposed to actually hosting it. So I'm excited to chat away for the next 54 minutes if we need to. So
Yeah.
how, how should we go about this?
You just attended did you attend the last workshop in Florida?
Yep. 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 I was
How did
there
that?
with Tom, who introduced me to the double or the Big Mac with quarter pound patties from McDonald's. That was so filling. It was good though.
You're gonna go to McDonald's, you gotta go big. That's
Yeah.
my you're gonna
Yeah.
get a
So
better product if you swap out the Big Mac burgers for the quarter pounders. I'm just, that's my free tip of the day.
yeah, that was kind of fun. We left the main meeting and him and I and two others, we went to McDonald's. Well, him and I were the only two that ate after dinner. And it was it was surprising the girl actually knew what we were talking about. So it was very interesting. So if anybody wants to try that, just get one burger because it's so filling. All right, on to the real stuff.
That's it.
Yeah, so I was there. It was great meetings. I think it was the most productive workshop we've ever had. A
Really?
lot of great AEs, a lot of AEs with deals in the hopper, including actually Tom, who's got one who's already he's kind of far along. We're kind of hitting post LOI with him. So yeah, we're in post LOI, right, Tom? Yeah, we just talked about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge passed back and forth. I actually learned some things from a few AEs myself. Obviously Hayden, our CEO, was there. Doug from our ACE team was there as well. Kike, or not Kike, Tato, who was filming it from our team, was there. Um, Suzanne, who does a lot of the people and culture, she was there. And then we had Eric, uh, who owns a general contracting firm that we're buying, and he's actually going to be running basically a platform company, doing a roll up with us in partnership with us after he sells his business. So he was there talking about some of the challenges of when he actually acquired a business, and then on the operations side, what he's had to deal with, and some of the things that he's done. And I think the AE's got a lot out of that. And then we also had uh, went out to go see Kevin Cooper's plumbing business on Saturday, and I think that was an eye opener for a lot of folks. And this was actually first time Kevin was, not in his usual, you know, dour sounding voice. He was actually pretty upbeat and funny. Um, so it was great, and I think he's got a lot out of that as well. So it was pretty productive.
Was that the first time you went to Kevin's business?
That was the first time I've ever been to Kevin's business. Yeah, since I helped him close on it. So, it's funny when we saw walked up. He was like, "Hey, we finally meet face to face for the first time," and kind of embraced and like a bro hug. So it was that was pretty cool.
How many of the people here have actually been to a workshop? You said Tom was there.
Mom was there. Gloria's been the one.
Yeah,
I
Gloria.
can't see.
Gloria was at my first workshop actually with Kevin Cooper.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I don't know who else is on the call, so I couldn't tell you. Oh,
Well, if you've been to one, speak up. But for those that haven't been, I was wondering if you could sort of give a rundown of what the workshop is like.
you know what? Hey, so we've got Tom on the call. Why don't Tom? Let's get it from an AE's perspective
That's a
on
good
what the
idea.
workshop was like.
I don't think
I
you're
like
gonna
that
pick on
idea.
me. No. So yeah, Tom Shearer, I've been let's see, I guess I joined up with the Accelerator Plus program in like December. I first started talking with the team, maybe going back to like September, October, something along that line. And then I got a chance to when I was kind of making the decision of joining, I chatted actually with Kevin and a couple of the guys down in Colorado, stuff like that. So yeah, luckily with I see Ali's on the call as well, like that the whole
Oh yeah,
sourcing.
Allie was there. My bad.
Yeah, we found a great electrical contracting business up in Westchester, New York. that we just signed over the weekend. I did my first site visit and in-person meeting with the owners on Wednesday, actually. So we're racing, which is great. So it was perfect timing to do one of the offsites workshops, I guess like the weekend. What, Allie, was it? I don't know if she's on, but yeah, I think we were like literally waiting for the signatures to come through while we were in the room like the whole time. So yeah, so it was great. You know, we spent obviously a lot of the first day, kind of like the half day talking about, you know, sourcing and stuff like that, which was, you know, obviously great for everyone. The second day we really dove into like the ACE side of things and closing and people and culture and some of the interesting techniques you can do, you know, for kind of growth and stuff like that was like right down the fairway with what I was hoping to get out of it.
Yep.
So yeah, so I thought like the second day was total home run. Obviously, knowing that I was going to be working with Rich, you know, sooner rather than later, you know, getting to know him in person was great. Same thing with Doug on the ACE side of things. You know, just knowing that, you know, knock on wood, in like 2.5, 3 months, we'll be in front of a business that I'm owning and saying, hey, here's my integration team, like let's get going. It was nice to just like have met the people in person and shake the hands and stuff like that. And then sort of on the last day, actually going to Kevin's business and seeing, you know, he did a great job of like, here's the marketing before, here's the, you know, here's everything before and after. Like he did a probably above and beyond in terms of
Yeah.
like showing us what the transformation's been in 6 months. And I would say like everyone who was there was like, oh man, this is awesome. Like this is how much you can get done in 6 months. Like it's really, you know, the transformation in a pretty short order was really inspiring. And, you know, I'm only kind of 1/3 of the way there, I guess, but like
Uh,
I definitely say it reinforced my conviction in joining Acquire in the first place. Because there's just so many things that like navigating on my own, I probably would have screened away the one that I'm in front of now. So yeah, I think like just being in person, you know, me and Hayden, we played like, you know, 3 hours of ping pong, stuff like that. Like, you know, just like the little things of kind of bonding made it a total home run, I thought.
yeah. Yeah, it was a fun time for sure.
Yeah.
Did Hayden
Um,
play ping pong with his right hand or his left hand? Because he pulled that trick on me last time I hung out.
We played both actually. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I've done
We were
that one
playing
too.
both lefty and righty. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
yeah, I refused to play him. He's like, let's go play, Rich. I was like, I number one, I suck. And number two, I get mad when I lose at stuff like that. So I didn't want to end up trying to body slam him. So, anyways, yeah. So
And
it was fun. It was fun. We stayed in we have three different properties that we stayed in. Tom stayed with me in
that's
one
right.
house. I think there was like six of us in a like a 6 or 7 bedroom house, and then most of the people stayed in the big mansion, I guess. Yeah, it wasn't a huge mansion, but it probably would have had like 8 rooms, 9 rooms or something.
Yeah,
And that's
well,
where we held most of the meetings. So it was a fun time. It was a fun time and very enlightening. And yes, I was there bugging Tom, hey, did they sign yet? Did they sign yet? So I'm glad it happened while we were there. And so I'm excited to get going with him on that particular part of it. But any of you guys, if you guys get a chance to attend a workshop,
yeah,
definitely I would make the effort to attend one. They're informative, they're enlightening, and like Tom said, you get to meet us personally and in a personal environment as well as I won't call it professional because I don't think any of us ever showed up professionally dressed in suits or anything like that, but semi-professional. So where we are being serious and trying to really get behind the nuts and bolts of acquiring and operating these businesses.
yeah.
So that's a good reason for everyone to get to an IC.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
You might get lucky like Tom as well. And
Oh,
get there.
there's Allie.
Like,
Yeah. I had a lot of
like,
a lot of fun with Allie, hanging out with her and her husband as well.
my husband got murdered at ping pong, so it was great. We were talking a lot of smack before, so that was great.
Does
Mhm.
everyone know what Allie does on the call?
That's what I was going to say, Ali. Maybe you can
Oh,
fill everyone in on what you do.
yeah, I mean,
That's
I
fun.
just wanted to be in the call to hear the AEs ask
We'll
a couple.
rope you in.
ask Rich a lot of questions. I want to know what those questions are. Just because it helps. I think it would help me. I'm the one that screens a lot of the businesses coming into on the deal flow weekly, basically. I kind of determine if the business makes sense or not, operational, financially. Just if it sounds like a scam or not. I mean, I look at a
Love your
lot of
background.
very weird businesses. So yeah, that's what I do. I
Allie's
found
been Allie's been modest. She is a I don't know, she still probably is it she's a business broker, so she's got a
yeah,
background
yeah.
in business brokering. So if you guys have any questions about business brokers or how to deal with them, Allie's your go-to person on that.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Miami, Florida, and I mean, just Florida is known for a lot of fraud, or just it just gets to the news faster than other states. So I mean, I've just seen a lot of businesses here in Miami that they don't make sense. Like when owners want to say, yeah, I have like 30%, I can't report it because I got it in cash. Just different things to look out for. It's definitely helped to be a business broker and then being able to review these businesses.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very cool.
So where do we want to take this, Ty?
I was gonna say maybe just open it up to questions. I know people have always seem to have a lot of questions for you, Rich. So maybe we can just open it up to the floor.
Questions about the process, the post LOI process, the pre LOI process, business broker questions. Because Allie's here.
Yeah, we can
You
pick
guys
Allie's
got
brain too.
you
I
guys
got a
have
question.
yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, so if I'm talking to an owner that just kind of really wants to get out of the operations of the business, but said they're willing to stay on past a year, does the SBA allow that or no?
So it used to be that the SBA wanted the owner completely transitioned out of the business, but now with them allowing partial buyouts, that is no longer the case. The one thing you need to be careful of is from that perspective is an owner might say they don't want to run the business day to day and they want to do what they do from a technical standpoint. And that seems like a dream scenario. But the challenge is going to be the employees on the other side. If he or she's still in the business and they're hanging out around, they're around the business, and yes, even if they're operating in a technical capacity. So, for instance, let's say there's a guy who's been running a plumbing operation. He's a master plumber. He loves plumbing, but he doesn't like running the business. And he's like, "Hey, I'll sell you my business, and I just want to go out and be a plumber." That sounds great. But the issue is just trying to transition the employees from thinking of that particular current owner as still the owner once the business transitions. So you have to kind of make sure that that person's in a position that's not so much decision making around. So like if they wanted to work out in the field and they were like a field tech, like a plumber out in the field and they were never in the office and no one ever really saw them, but they were great at what they would do. I have no issue with that. I think the SBA has no issue with that. We as investors have no issue with that. But the problem is just culturally from a I guess from a historical perspective, employees that have been working with this person for the last 20 years are going to still see them as the person making the decisions until you can disabuse them of that. And if they're in a management capacity, you'll never get away with that.
Yeah, this is a cabinet manufacturer, and he's like, if I could just be in sales and not have to deal with anything else, then I would love
Actually yeah, that actually would be perfect because he's probably got all the relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay.
Is that the only question for the day?
Yeah,
Great.
James always has a question. I see him unmuted.
I'm trying to get my camera to work.
I know, James. James, you know all the answers already.
I know. What am I going to ask a question for? I don't know what the hell's going on with my camera. Anyways, I did have a question. So man, so this deal, the same deal I messaged you on, Rich, it's like an e-com deal. We've been going back and forth on this thing. my IOI is basically an LOI. We're agreed on all the terms, right? And now it's like a chicken and the egg where he wants a term sheet from a bank, and then I show I'm talking to a bank, and of course this deal's got hair. Every single deal's got hair, right? Now okay, let me get to the point here. Does the transaction advisory services, do you all, so that includes what, like kind of running the deal, um, from LOI to close? Is that what the transaction advisory services are?
It's
Maybe.
basically quarterbacking the deal. So when you think about it from the standpoint of there's so many steps and processes along the way, you're going to do a lot of that. We're going to be there to kind of quarterback it for you. So from the standpoint of um, obviously reviewing the LOI is kind of the first step in that process, but then kind of coordinating with QOE and reviewing QOE with you, making sure we marry the QOE report with the due diligence narrative to make sure that they are in sync and that they make sense. Because sometimes you'll get answers on the other parts of the due diligence, and then you try to relate them to your financials. For instance, they talk about, well, we've got like, 17 employees and this person does this and this person does that. And then when you look at the QOE and it shows that you don't have 17 employees, you have 6 employees. Under just making sure that you can kind of relate the two, and making sure that that due diligence ties to what you're actually seeing in the financials. We'll participate in that process. If there's modeling that needs to be done, we'll kind of assist you from that standpoint. Business plan writing, you need to write your business plan. Obviously, we'll be there to help from that standpoint to review it. And if there's parts that, that we have to kind of physically write, we'll do that as well. And then it's just a matter of, coordinating with your attorney, coordinating with the commercial insurance broker, coordinating with the lender, and just quarterbacking to make sure all that stuff gets done along the way and done correctly and timely, and making sure that, again, there's no steps missed in the process. And then obviously with legal, we'll kind of coordinate it from that standpoint and reviewing the draft purchase agreement to make sure everything that we wanted to accomplish in the deal is actually being accomplished. I'm sure we have an AE on here. I won't say her name, but I'm sure she could speak to the fact that we get to the draft purchase agreement and you realize that the seller isn't trying to basically include everything that you've agreed to in the LOI, and it's up to us to catch that. Or they just didn't read the LOI and then they come back and realize, what, you want me to provide working capital? But anyway, so, I mean, it's just making sure all of the steps along the process are done and completed. And there's going to be issues around like, how do I understand what the backlog looks like? Does this make sense? Kind of just basically guiding you along that way, all the way through to the close. That's mainly what we do, kind of quarterback and project manage the deal all the way through.
Okay. So do you do that outside of um home services or manufacturing, I guess, outside
Yes.
of what the fund does, right?
Yeah. So we do that for any business whatsoever.
Okay. Awesome.
I mean, I don't like to, well, I won't use that one as an example, but I mean, I'm not gonna sit and pretend like I have some expertise around fish farms. So if you bring something to me like that way, I'll probably say, hey, I can help you through the process. But as far as understanding the due diligence, I don't know much about fish farms. I would probably defer to someone else. I'd probably be on the phone calling someone, hey man, what do you know about fish farms? Can you tell me real quick? But
Right.
if it's,
Yeah.
a normal business, manufacturing, construction related industries, trades, B2B service, B2C service, even e-commerce, pretty much every industry out there outside of maybe 2 or 3.
Okay.
That happening all
The
over.
so for this, I guess I'll ask a transaction specific
Yep.
problem slash question. So with this deal specifically, the owner has a business, right? A corporation. He's got 2 websites. Okay. one sells product A, the other sells a completely different product. I'm buying website A, right? Well,
Mhm.
website B just so happens to lose money every single year, right? And to the tune of millions.
Okay.
So the bank, and this is where my problem is, he wants a bank on board before he'll sign an LOI, so but I need an LOI to do basically anything worthwhile, right? But so there was a previous buyer who did a Q of E, but
Uh-huh.
they like recreated the Q of E, and I don't have access to it, but he kind of explained it to me. They did the whole thing, transaction level, recreated the P&Ls from the bank statements and et cetera, et cetera. And for this brand, it looked good. It was within like $40,000, right? Well, the bank is like, we want a Q of E on everything, right? So we want to know what is over here in this bucket, because they want to be confident that there's nothing over here. And I agree with them. They
Yeah,
want to
I
become,
do
there's
too.
nothing over here that pertains to this stuff, right? So you're telling us that this is, okay, we were able to recreate this. That's fine. What is all this, right? And can
Yeah.
we prove where all these went? So, um, and this is probably standard for any business. So you guys, does Acquira do Q of E's, or do you guys work? You kind of quarterback that with somebody else, or is it somebody within Acquira that does that type of? And do they do what I'm describing, where it's like, you know, line by,
Yeah.
go through the bank
So
statements and all that stuff, and kind of verify
yeah.
everything?
So people are quote unquote outside QOE person is really he's on our team. And that's why we like to go through him because even on the A side, he's also the finance integrator on that side. So if he's doing the QOE, he's got some insight into kind of what's going on. So it makes the finance integration part of it a lot smoother from that standpoint. That's something that he would definitely carve out. Because obviously if you're buying A, you just want to make sure that there are no shared services or shared revenue between the two, and you clearly can delineate what you're buying from what you're not buying, which is why I understand why the lender wants to see a complete QOE because they want to be able to specify specifically line by line. This is an expensive B, and this is not an expensive A. Or a revenue tied to A versus B. And I get that, but that's something, yeah, the QOE person in conjunction with working with you and I would try to make sure that we have clear understanding of kind of what that delineation looks like. Now obviously that's going to depend on the seller's participation as well. Because we'll have to dig deep into the general ledgers to make sure that that information is separable. Um, but yeah, I mean that's something that yeah that people would probably handle.
Okay,
For the most part.
cool. Yeah, so that's what I'm dealing with right now. So I'll I'll reach out to you and see what that looks like. Maybe there's something we
Okay,
can figure out.
no worries. Um, anyone else?
Uh, I have two questions. The first one will be, what is your position on Aquarius position on the construction company type of business? Is something that you recommend? Not a subcontractor, but the construction company.
Well, it kind of depends. Are you talking about a general contractor? Are you talking about a sub? Or are you talking about and what are they doing in construction? Are they doing residential subdivisions, which I hate personally, or are they doing work for commercial clients that where they've got these are like A-list clients, like think Amazon building warehouses or Prologis or someone like that. I mean, what was specifically, there's so many areas, aspects of construction that you could end up going into. One or the other could make sense or not make sense.
Okay, if it is a company that they subcontract with the electrical, with a plumber,
Mhm.
with a
Oh, we
concrete.
love those businesses. Yeah,
Yeah.
love those businesses. Yeah,
They are the like the main company.
yeah. We love those businesses. The thing is, when you're looking at a business like that, I would always advise from the get-go, if you don't have like a pipeline report from them, to understand what projects are in the pipeline, or any backlog information, like deals that are just kind of, waiting to get started. If you don't have any of that information, and when you're analyzing a business like that, I would assume you just take 25% of revenue off the top and reduce the expenses based on an average margin for those last 3 years as well. Just because with construction type industries, you're going to get some lumpiness in revenues. It's just because that's the nature of construction. You may get a big project one year, may not get that same project. You're going to have a different shifting customer mix. So customer concentration isn't an issue on construction side because you're naturally going to have a shifting customer base. You're not going to have the same customer doing construction work, the same type of construction work every single year. You may, if they're building warehouses throughout the United States or something like that, but most likely in your local market, you're probably not going to have that. That's for a national construction company that can follow a client around the country to do stuff like that. So customer concentration isn't an issue, but I would just assume if you don't have backlog information, pipeline information, I would value the business just I slash 25% of the revenue and cash flow off the bat and just assume that that's your sustainable number to start with.
Okay. My other question is completely different. Is SBA doesn't allow earn-outs. How can you structure an offer to compensate for that?
Yeah, they don't allow earn-outs, but they allow forgivable seller notes, which is a structure you could use. You can also use accelerated payments based on the performance. So that's, accelerated payments of the seller note. There's ways to get around the quote unquote earn-out language. It's just they by historical standards, they've never allowed them. Sellers don't like them to begin with. Just so you guys understand, it's hard to get a seller to agree to an earn-out if the seller is not involved in the business moving forward. Because you control the operations of the business, and what's to prevent you, not saying that any of you guys would do this, but what's to prevent you from basically slow rolling the business just so you don't have to pay them the additional amount of money. So sellers hate it. But there's ways to do these things through forgivable note structures, through accelerated payments, all kinds of ways to structure. You just have to be a little bit creative and not call it an earn-out. But yeah, by historical definition, they don't allow earn-outs, even though they kind of do.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Rich, Patrick asked, what about fencing companies in the chat? Install and assemble fences for customers as well as selling their own products wholesale to other retailers.
No, fencing companies are fine. I'd want to understand from a fencing perspective, are most of their revenue derived from retail operations, or is it divide, or does it come through general contracting type work? I don't want to understand, do they control the installers or are they subs? But fencing companies, we looked at a number of those. We haven't seen one in the last couple of years, but I remember a couple of years ago, we probably saw, we were probably seeing like one or two per month in investment committee. And they're actually pretty good companies as long as the fencing company has a number of GCs that they're working with. On the retail side, I don't have a problem with fencing companies on the retail side. You're just the margins sometimes if you're selling kind of the same fencing, if it's not something that you're kind of, I guess, fabricating on your own. The margins can be tight in those types of businesses. But for the most part, fencing can be if you're doing the sale and you're doing the installations, I have no problem with those businesses. I like them. And if you're renting, I love the fencing businesses where you can rent like chain link fences. Those are great.
You rent the warehouse or the property?
Yeah, well, no, like say a GC has they're doing a construction job and they need fencing to protect the area. Or if there's a company owns a warehouse and they don't want to buy the fencing and they do like geo fencing or whatever, and you can supply that for a monthly fee. I like all that kind of stuff.
Because then you get the fences back after after the
Yeah,
job
you
is
get
done.
you get them back. Yeah, get them back after they're done with it. It's a security feature basically. So
Cool.
And-
Any other questions?
Do you like a general contractors business?
so I gotta say this politically correct. Since we're buying one. I love the right type of general contracting business. I don't like GCs that are building residential homes. I don't like those kind of GCs. I don't like, and I'm going to say this, not just me, just in discussions, kind of beating around ideas with like Hayden and Doug and Brian, and there's reasons why we like certain businesses over others. I don't like general contractors, like I said, doing residential subs. I don't like general contractors building office complexes. Um, it's only obvious why for offices, people just still aren't going, there's a lot of open office space right now because people are still working a lot from home. And I don't think that's going to shift. I mean, there's some people that are going back to work, but they're trying to convert a lot of these office buildings into residential, or like multifamily properties now and stuff like that, because they know the office market isn't coming back. Those are really the two main ones. General contractors that are doing, warehouse construction, those are okay. Remodels, those are okay. Even on residential properties. GCs that are doing, unique things like, maybe they're a general contractor that does specifically fencing. They've been on the jobs, and then there's like construction beyond that. I like those. But anytime I see someone coming to me with, hey, this guy, they build houses or they build custom houses or something like that, I'm just like, eh. And the reason being is because there's so much competition around that, and the residential market tends to be very whimsical, on the construction on the side, and then you have to bid every single job, and most of the time you're going to be at 25-30%. So every day you're out there having to sell. Whereas if you're the sub on the job, you generally have a relationship with that particular GC, but you have a relationship with a number of different GCs. So there's always consistent business coming in versus being the actual GC. Really, GCs, unless they're very specialized and they have specialized contracts like the one that we're looking at, you really are, think about what you're buying. You're buying a guy or a gal who just basically is bidding on jobs. They usually don't have a lot of assets. If they do have heavy equipment, that might be worthwhile, but most general contractors don't own their own heavy equipment. They rent it. So, you got to think about what you're actually buying. Or you're buying basically a bidding company, from that standpoint, unless they have contracts, with A-list clients.
And rental equipment construction.
Rental equipment doesn't concern me. I'm just saying if you're buying a GC, just understand you're not buying any assets for the most part.
But
No.
a business who rents construction equipment, scaffoldings and things like that.
No, I don't have any inherent bias against businesses that rent equipment if they've got contracts that, in long-term contracts in place. Not long-term contracts, but they've got some sort of contracts in place. They've got some sort of pipeline, 9-month pipeline out there where they've got at least 9 months worth of work out there, because that gives them time to go out and bid other jobs on top of it to continue to build that pipeline if they got a lot of backlog. I don't have any problem with a GC that has that and rents equipment. I'm just saying from a purchase standpoint, you wouldn't be buying anything with any assets in it. You need to understand exactly what you're buying from that standpoint. You're basically, if you have a good contractor and he's got those types of things in place, then you're buying not only the bidding process, but you're buying basically the pipeline. You're buying, if they've got contracts, you're buying that. You're buying the backlog. They may have some small amount of equipment that you're buying. If they've got crews that they're working with, if they've got crews on staff, you're buying talent, versus if they're using subs. So there's other things that you're buying versus if you're buying a GC doesn't have a pipeline, a GC that doesn't have a backlog. They've done a lot of business, but when then you look at their balance sheet, there's no equipment, there's no people, there's no pipeline or backlog. there's, you understand what you're getting. You're basically getting a bidding machine from that standpoint. That's all I'm saying. So if they rent equipment, fine. I mean, and they're making profit off of that, that's fine. But that's not a part of your value calculation per se. That's where kind of like that pipeline or those relationships become a little bit more valuable. Because remember, when you're buying a lot of these small businesses, you're not buying a lot of assets to begin with. It's mostly goodwill. So you need to understand in terms of that goodwill, what you're actually getting. Is it a customer? Are you getting customer lists? Are you getting relationships? Are you getting some sort of a trademark or patent? There's a lot of stuff within the good that qualifies as goodwill over and above the hard assets. So you just have to understand exactly what you're buying.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any sensitivity to a GC that does a lot of public works?
No, GCs that can, you mean like government contracts?
Yeah.
Oh, no, those are great. And I'll tell you right now, Chris from the equity fund would get on and he'd be salivating if you got, because he loves government contracts.
I was just curious because I mean, obviously the bidding process can be very competitive and then you go through that whole process. But I mean, obviously we're looking at a couple of them and right now, and one of them is particularly focused on government contracts, but it is pretty heavy asset intensive. So,
yeah.
But then they're asking for obviously a huge multiple. So
Oh yeah,
it's going to be some work on that.
Yeah, those government contracts tend to be longer term. And then there's I mean, the risks around a fluctuating economy doesn't necessarily affect those because government's going to pay no matter what. They take our tax dollars and they pay no matter what. So those are beautiful businesses from a buying standpoint. You just got to be careful. You got to be careful that you're not buying a business though that's like got some sort of special status, because obviously if it's got a special status and that's been the result of why they've won bids or why they've been offered jobs and you're not of that special status, then I mean, what's the point,
Yeah. I got a little squeamish at a deal I looked at previously that was focused on Department of Transportation projects, and then Governor Hobbs came out with her budget proposal that basically put a freeze on all new projects. So like, you're always at the whim of the government and their budget. So like if you're looking at California that has 30, 40, 50, $60 billion deficit, then it might be a little different. But
but you know what? But California still keeps spending money. That's just they don't care. Apparently, the government doesn't care.
It doesn't matter.
And then there could be a budget freeze or what have you. But if you're already in there, then most likely the government never cuts. They just, they'll just freeze and not grow or bring in new vendors, but they'll continue to still use the same ones. They never cut. That's a fair point. Part of the problem. But I'll get off my soapbox about that.
I have
good insight though. Thanks.
I have a couple of questions. One is related to that. So the status thing. So there was a deal I was looking at recently where it was a female-owned business, right? Like a certified women-owned organization. And so I asked about that. I'm like, okay, what do we know, okay, how much of sales are kind of dependent on this? Do we even know that? Is there a way to quantify that, right? Like when somebody selects your bid, because it was commercial roofing, when somebody selects your bid, do they have to say that they selected you because, or part of the reason, is there a process there? Like if they selected you to kind of like, I don't want to say check a box, right? But I mean, because a lot of companies have to, or they're incentivized to do business with certain designations, right? Or they get benefits from doing so. Do they have to say that, or do they just do it?
Yeah, I would think that would be hard to
because they said
verify.
no. They said no, it's not impacted at all. And I was like, then why do you have it?
Yeah. And that's
I
one
think
thing.
they have it just for cookies, like just for cookie points, whatever they call it, to be quite honest. The businesses that I've seen, it doesn't really matter if they have like veteran status. I mean, sometimes veterans, I think that could be a little bit more impactful, but minority and gender, I haven't seen it impacted. Like just put it into perspective. I'm in South Florida. If somebody has minority status, we're all minority, the most of us down here, so it doesn't, sometimes it won't make a difference. If it does make a difference, I'm sure that you'll be able to see it because that's all public information.
Yeah, and I would say it's kind of hard to separate what a customer's decision making criteria looks like from that standpoint, because they may say, oh no, we offer the person, the best person who could do the job, the actual job, when maybe in the back of their mind they wanted to offer it to give, to basically, like I said, either earn brownie points, or they felt like, there would be a government, some sort of an audit from someone coming to see how many that they had awarded to certain groups or what have you. That's hard. That's gonna be hard for you to verify on your side. But what I would always caution, people that own those businesses. I used to have a client when I worked for Morgan. It was a mid-market manufacturing company, and it was owned by, I think it was an Asian guy, and they were doing, I don't know, probably 250, $300 million a year in revenue. And he wanted to sell it, and it wasn't a small business anymore, but he still had his like minority status or something like that. It was some special, and it wasn't even like a normal one that I'd ever seen before. But what we cautioned him to do from the get-go, when he came to us, was, hey, start to decertify at this point, because when you go to sell that business, you're going to restrict your market big time. Because a person who's not a part of that group, that market is going to, they're not going to want to buy the business, because they're going to be thinking about whether, you were winning these contracts based on who you were versus the quality of the job that you were able to do. So I think from your standpoint, James, it's going to be hard for you to kind of pick apart that. But, if it's a business that was something that you were interested in, I would actually ask the sellers, and this is my opinion. I only may be saying I'm full of it, but I would ask the sellers to decertify if they're confident that they want to sell this business. Start decertifying like a year ahead of time, and let's see what your numbers look like without having that status behind you. Because it may not, like Ali said, it may not have made a difference whatsoever. Or in some cases, especially if it's a government-owned business, they're doing government contracts, it could have made a huge difference. You don't know.
Doesn't the government, so that was the reason that I kind of thought of it, was we were talking about government contracts. So when you get awarded a
They probably
contract,
track it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, they probably
don't
even
tell a buyer. The person who's selling the services, but I'm sure they probably track it somehow.
Yeah, they have to do a certain percentage. Yeah. Okay. And then so the second question was, so there's a thing coming up in March that I recently learned about, related to 1099, like the changes to qualifications, or the changes to like the 1099 test, right? So like a contractor test. So, and it goes into effect on March 11th. And it kind of, from what I've read, it changes a lot. And I don't see anybody really talking about it, right? Where it's going to be a lot more difficult to justify a 1099, right? Like they have to be a true 1099. So a lot of people will do 1099, right? But they're not, right? Technically, or they shouldn't be, right? Because the rules were kind of vague, or the test was kind of vague, right? So I guess they're changing it. So this business that I was looking at, they do like casino massages, right? So you know those people, you're
what?
casino massages. So
okay,
like,
I just want to make sure I heard you right. Okay.
Yeah, so like the girls who walk around in a casino, right, or a hotel, or where, some sort of, let's just say casinos, right? And then they do the massages by the minute or by the hour or whatever. But they're all 1099. They have like 250 1099s, right?
Okay.
And they have contracts, so it's an interesting business, right? So I mean, they've got contracts with like Caesar's Palace and some other, casinos in Vegas, Atlantic City, and some hotels. So it's like actually a pretty compelling business. I don't know how to look at this, from that lens, because if they're doing it, do I just assume, right, that that's not a problem? Because I'm like looking at some of these tests and I'm like, well, these people can't work really whenever they want. They can't really do much to increase their own business, right? These tests that they're kind of changing it to. What are your thoughts, I guess?
Yeah, I can't comment about the specific rules. I've heard on the outskirts kind of that it's changing, but I haven't like actually read them. But the first question I would ask are the girls, do they have contracts with the company that's actually doing them? So even though if they're 1099, are they getting contracts in place as entities themselves, or are they just signing, or are they just basically paying them directly as an individual? In that case, that would be one of the first things I would look for, because if they're all their own individual companies and they do have freedom to sign or not sign the contract or work whenever they want, it would be hard for the government to justify that they're not independent contractors, no matter what the changes are.
And is this something you would, so if you were interested, right? Is this
I get a
something you would,
labor attorney to look at it.
yeah, is this, would you do it before LOI, or would you be like, okay, I like this, get under LOI, this is one of the first things that I do?
That's what I would do, because it doesn't
Yeah.
cost you anything to get something under LOI.
Right.
And then once you've
Otherwise, who
got it under,
knows?
yeah, once you've got it under LOI, they're going to be willing to provide more insight and more information about how they work with these individuals. And then from there, I would probably consult like a labor attorney to figure out exactly kind of what the rules are and what the tests are, and would these people actually pass that test? Because obviously, if they come on as employees, now you're going to have a burden on costs and
Right. What does that
that
look
sort
like?
of thing.
Exactly. Could lower the
Yeah,
earnings if you have to change it. Maybe that's why
yeah,
they're selling. Who knows?
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
I'm just thinking, what kind of wise guy are you going to be buying from?
It is to say that, so it's 4 companies, okay, with 4 different ownership structures. They have their own custom software they developed. It's actually pretty interesting. Yes, wise guys though. It's I know what you mean when you say that. It's interesting. Very, I mean, every deal is interesting. I keep thinking about that. Once I buy a business, once I finally get one done, it's like, man, buying a business is fun. Like searching like this, when do you get to look at all of these crazy, I mean, just I feel like I'm just gonna do this in my spare time anyways. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna be like cruising biz by sell, just looking, it's like, man, well, what's this business about? Right. Because man, the hunt is fun, right? Especially when you get these really just interesting businesses, to say the least. You learn a
You
lot.
never
Yeah,
know what you'll come across.
yeah, that's true. That's what the difference was. They say the difference between being single and married, though. After a while, though, the hunt gets tiring.
Yeah. Well, I've been at it for a while, so I feel that. More ways than one.
So, well, cool. Anyone else have anything before we hop off?
Hey, Rich, remind me the master license and the SBA. Like, I've got a seller that's pushing back on being able to use his license and get SBA funding.
Well, that's kind of a broad question. Generally, the lender wants to see that there's some sort of a licensing transition plan in place. Obviously, that licensing transition plan depends upon the circumstances of the particular buyer-seller relationship in that particular business. So if you have a seller who is the only licensed person in the business, and as soon as you sell the business, they want out, you got a problem. Unless you're in California. It's a little bit easy, which is ironic that unless you're in California,
so
Arizona,
the challenge of this one's to know. So he is willing to stick around at least for a little while, maybe a
it's a
year or
little
so.
while.
But to get so it's a master electrical license in Texas, and to get that without hiring, I either have to hire someone or to get it, it's like an 8-year waiting process, right?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics about in Texas, but if this person is, I mean, what's the length of time that he's willing to stick around?
He at least a year.
Okay, so that basically gives you and there's no one else's that does he have any like apprentices or journeyman electricians in the business?
It's actually very similar to Tom's deal. It's a union based. All their electricians are part of the union.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And when you have a union based company like that, there could be some rules around you being able to offer that particular some particular employee and some sort of additional incentive and equity in the business to get that license. So you'd have to actually understand and read that the union contract to understand what you can and what you can't do. But in general, if you got a situation where you got a seller who's willing to stick around for a year, a couple different ways you can handle that is to leave them with a small amount of equity in the business so that you can use that license, or they have an incentive for you to use that license for some sort of a time period to give you a chance to at least go out and find someone to hire. But you're gonna have to. The other way to do this is gonna be as you're kind of going through the acquisition process is to find the state. In Arizona, they call it the State Board of Contractors. I don't know what they call it in Texas, but you'll have to go to that state authority, so to speak, that has a listing for all the trades and contractors that are out there and look for a master electrician and offer to bring them on. That's another way to handle that. But you're gonna have to have some way to resolve that issue because I mean if he's the only licensed person in the business or master
Yeah, gotcha.
licensed person in the business, the lender's not gonna want to do that deal because
The SBA doesn't require the license holder to have any
no, but it's a lender.
guarantee in the there don't have to be a guarantor or anything like that for the SBA loan, do they?
That's going to be very lender specific. So
Gotcha.
we've seen some lenders like First Internet Bank, they won't require something like that. Whereas if you go to Live Oak, they may require something like that. Whereas if you go to Wells Fargo, they will require something like that.
Gotcha. Lender
So
specific is the key.
yeah,
Gotcha.
that's going to be a lender specific issue because obviously it's their comfort with you being able to pay back that loan, even though 75% of it is guaranteed by the SBA. They still want to make sure they're not on the hook for the other 25%.
Okay. I think that was the main question, the lender specific.
I don't want to
All right,
crash his response, but with Tom, we actually learned that sometimes the union requires it as well.
What do you mean?
Like one of the Tom, I mean, he already spoke with the owners. He could probably describe it best. But basically, depending on the jobs, was it Tom?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, the projects that the previous owner that had the license had already signed off. He kind of has to sign off,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, yeah, Todd, yeah, so like in my case, like we weren't sure if we'd have to keep the prior owner on. There's someone below the owner that apparently has all the licenses minus like the fire detector, whatever one thing he's got to get. But basically, because it's commercial, like the current owner has his name on projects that are going out like 3-4 months.
Yeah, like the permits
So
and all that kind of stuff required for the
we
projects.
either have to pay not a fine, pay a fee to transfer the name on each of these projects from owner A to new GMB, or he has to stay on until they finish. So my guess is I'll have to kind of keep him on and have his license on some projects for I don't know, like 2-3 months or something like that. It's a little bit longer than I was expecting. But everything's a cost of doing business at some point, right? Someone's got hair on it.
And it's not just like 10, like you're gonna keep him around like as a consultant. You have to pay him.
You got to pay him
He has so
full.
many hours. He has to be full-time employee essentially.
Union, he said retirement from the union takes like 2 months. So it's not like you can be like, great, after a week, I'll transfer it over, you sign a couple papers, and then I'm a consultant. He's got to be a full-time 35-hour a week union guy through whenever we stop using his license. Yeah.
And make sure you look into your specific situation, Tom, because Tom's company also is in New York, which is known to have strong unions. So maybe Texas is a lot less aggressive from that standpoint. But you definitely need to review the union contract to see kind of what you can and what you can't do, or what you would have to do from that standpoint.
Okay, appreciate it.
All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and
Yep. Next week we'll have Eli Elbrecht from SMB Law Group. They did a bunch of small business.
Oh, you got Eli
deals.
coming on?
Yeah,
Oh,
he'll be on
nice.
next
I
week.
might even watch.
Nice.
Come on.
So everyone tell your friends.
Eli's awesome. Eli's great.
All right.
Sweet.
Hey, it was great to see all you guys again.
Rich.